Welcome back to BK Nothing But Nets podcast. Of course, I'm joined with my partner in crime, Dylan from Nets Press. Dylan, we got a little bit of breaking news that just came out a little while ago about a trade target for the Nets. Do you want to touch on that real quick, or do you want to get straight into Cam Johnson?
Let's get into Cam Johnson, dude. There's a ton of
right.
packages that I have listed that are potential move ups for the Nets that include Cam Johnson. There's been rumors now showing up left and right about the Nets' willingness to move up for a second lottery pick. Let's stick with that. That's the more interesting news of the day for me. So let's get to it.
It does. It does seem like that Cam's going to get moved. As we got closer to the deadline last year, it became more and more evident to me the Nets aren't going to move Cam Johnson. He's going to be a net for the remainder of the season. But it does feel like now that the Nets are serious about moving him. I just want to start with this real quick. Do you think this was the plan all along? I mean, if a Mikal Bridges type trade came along, they would have moved him. But do you think that the plan all along was to keep Cam Johnson until the offseason?
I can never really say if Sean Marks has a plan or not, right?
Yeah.
This guy is somebody who genuinely never seems to know what he's doing, even on the morning of, let's just say draft night. Like you never know what this guy's going to do. I don't think he liked the offers that were coming in for Cam Johnson. I think he was crazy for not taking the Spurs trade originally that they had proposed. There was a couple of deals out there that they could have definitely jumped on, but they didn't. And now you're in a position where he had a very stellar season. Towards the end of it, he dealt with a couple of injuries, a couple of inconsistent games. I'm not sure if that drops his value at all, but I think a lot of teams are valuing him as a key, fourth option player on a team that's hoping to win now. And you have a couple of teams up there. San Antonio's at 14. Atlanta's at 13, and if you look at how poor the Eastern Conference is looking right now, Cleveland's dealing with financial issues. They may have to move off of guys like, Darius Garland, Jared Allen. There was a rumor out there that Evan Mobley could be a potential trade target for a team like Milwaukee if they decide to move Giannis. There's that conversation with Giannis in Milwaukee. What are they going to do? Does he stay in the East? Does he get, shipped out to the West? Does he stay? And then, of course, you have Boston, who's dealing with Jason Tatum's Achilles tear. So the East is wide open. Atlanta could definitely be a team that's looking at Cam Johnson. They had previously shown interest in him prior. And then, of course, you have Houston at 10, which kind of just got confirmed today by Kevin O'Connor, is a team that's shopping that 10th overall pick, whether that be to move up in the draft, to receive a Spurs-like package when they traded Rob Dillingham 2 years ago on draft night to Minnesota, where they got 2 future first-round picks, or whether that be to package that pick up with some picks and grab a star. So the Rockets are a team now that are in that conversation for Brooklyn's potential second lottery pick. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the Rockets is the ideal pick, right? That was originally our pick. We shipped that off to bump 2 spots up, which looks horrible now. But if there is a world where you can go out there and get that pick back, having 8 and 10 along with 19, that's something that you could really work around.
I want to talk to you. I know that the goal here is to get. I want to spend a minute on the Rockets pick because obviously we have a trade history with the Rockets.
Mm-hmm.
I know the goal is to get another second round pick.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in a second lottery pick? Would you be interested in a Houston trade that got us the swap rights taken off the 2027 pick, where that becomes our pick? Right, you remove the swap from the 2027.
I think you have to look at how. Yeah, I think you kind of have to look at what you really want, right? By 2027, the Nets should be back in conversations for stars, for playoff contention. I don't think that pick really has much value in terms of what Sean Marks may want, right? Realistically, you don't want to be rebuilding for a total of 4 years, right? It's been 2 years since we got rid of KD and Kyrie. We're going to be moving into year 3. This is considerably the first year of the rebuild because this will be the first year that we actually bring in young talent through the draft, right? Last year is probably the last year of this. And next year's offseason could be draft and trade for a star. So
I would say if you get your pick back, it gives you another year to rebuild, right? Because if you don't get your pick back in 2027, that's it. You got to try to win in 2027. I realistically, I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news here. I don't think the Nets with Con Kneppel because we ain't getting Fears. Like I see Fears being mocked at 4 and 5 now. We ain't getting Fears.
I know. Yep. It's tough to look at too, man. I swear to God, everybody that I fall in love with in terms of draft prospects always seem to bump up. I mean, I was on Igor Demin at the start of college basketball. He was my dark horse to go top 5. He was all the way down. He was all the way up to top 4. He dropped all the way down into the 20s, and now he's back up into that top 12 conversation, right? You have guys like Fears, who I fell in love with midway through the season. I had him projected between, 8 through 12. We got 8, and now he's projected into the top 6. So it's like every single time I put a player out there, man, I swear they continuously shoot up draft boards and we fail to get them. But the reason why Houston is so interesting to me is because if you look at their draft capital, they're in prime position for Devin Booker. And though Devin Booker is not a guy that is currently available, there have been talks and rumors about Houston's willingness to ship those picks back to Phoenix for Booker when the time comes. Those same conversations have come up with Kevin Durant. But if you look at KD versus Booker, right, you're talking about a 28, 29-year-old compared to a guy that's about to be 37. Do you really want to give that capital up for a guy who's only going to give you a year or two? And I think that conversation's kind of dying down in Houston, at least from everything that I've heard from Dusty, who I spoke with, Spurs reporter. He mentioned that, the Spurs are now the favorites to land Kevin Durant, right? The Giannis conversation is kind of dying out. There seems to be a willingness between both sides where they may try and run this back one more year with how weak the East is. And if that's the case and the Spurs go in for Kevin Durant, what does that leave Houston, right? Now you're in a position where you kind of
love that. I mean, I trust Dusty, but I just don't love that. Like Kevin, I don't think San Antonio is a championship team.
Well, I think the way that you want to look at it is, well, I disagree with that. I think they are a championship team. I think when you have two incredibly gifted scorers in KD and Fox, alongside two young guards who can play both sides of the floor in Harper and Castle, all while having Wemby as your, defensive player of the year guy every year moving forward.
Well, it would be Harper or Castle. That he would have to go with the other.
I don't think so. Because if you really look at it, right, KD's turning 37. His value's what? 2 first-round picks? All right.
I was going to ask you that. That was my next question.
I think if you gave Phoenix the 14th pick and a future first-round pick unprotected with an additional protected first, plus Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sochan, and Keldon Johnson, they're looking for win-now pieces in Phoenix because they're trying to keep Devin Booker happy, right? So do you go with youth, which could put him in a position to where, all right, well, you're not taking me serious, so now let me request a trade, right? So it's kind of a really shitty position for Phoenix. They're going to get minimal value back, but they're also going to have to either force themselves to try and build something around Booker, which inevitably won't work because we've seen this happen before where, things get blown up, a star gets left there, and they have to try and work around it, and it never works. Look at KD, for example, right? We were in talks for Pascal Siakam with Toronto after we traded Kyrie Irving, and instead of moving Nick Claxton for Pascal to keep KD here, we decided to trade KD, right? In those positions, 9 times out of 10, the superstar ends up getting moved. So to me, I think Devin Booker is that next moving piece next season. And I think if, Houston's serious about getting him, simply giving up the 10th overall pick in Jabari Smith, plus a salary filler for Cam Johnson, maybe the Nets throw in pick 26 and 27. Maybe they throw in a future first. Maybe they give the 2027 pick the full rights to Houston, right? So they would have their own 27 and our 27. Who knows? But either way, if they do that, Cam Johnson's a guy that can really intrigue Devin Booker to make that decision, right? Because they've played together. Booker's talked very highly of Cam Johnson. He says that his favorite team to watch is the Nets because of Cam Johnson and Mikal when they were here. There's connections, if Houston goes out and gets Cam Johnson, there's a real shot that Devin Booker looks at that situation and says, this is the team that I can win on right now, right? A combination of, Amen Thompson, Devin Booker, Cam Johnson, Dylan Brooks, and Alperen Sengun. That's a contender in the West, and it's youthful too. So you have a lot of moving pieces that you could still improve the roster with. So I'm eyeing Devin Booker as a Houston trade target. And I think that they're going to pass on Kevin Durant to be able to put themselves in that position, which is why I think Cam Johnson should be their top target.
All right. We'll get to that. I got one other question, just kind of a broad basketball question. If Indiana wins the championship, which my inkling is that Indiana's going to win the championship. You guys can call me crazy, but I've said that since they beat Cleveland, that they're going to win the championship. if Indiana wins the championship, does that kind of change the calculus on how teams are going to view superstars? Because Indy would have won a championship with no superstar. We could say Halliburton is not a superstar. He's a good player,
He's
right?
a star. He's not a superstar.
He's a borderline all-star to me.
Yeah, it just really depends on how he plays in the first half of the season because he's very inconsistent. But when he is on and when he takes over a game, he is serious. So, it really it's a strange topic with him in terms of that superstar, all-star range. Like he could show up one day and be, Ben Simmons. The next day he could show up and he could be, a Jimmy Butler 2.0 in the playoffs where he puts up a triple-double and takes over a game. So it's like it makes no sense.
His game is weird, right? Like sometimes when he's cooking and they're moving the ball and he's got 30 and 15, it looks great. And then sometimes you see him like he's just crab dribbling and then taking like a step back and throwing it. Like it's like, guy, what are you doing? He's a hard guy to get a read on. I watch him sometimes and I'm like, this guy is one of the premier players in the league. And I watch him other times like, this guy sucks. I really can't get a read on him.
Yeah, I mean, and something interesting that I haven't even talked about yet is Minnesota's interest in Kevin Durant. And they have the 17th overall pick, right? They don't really have much draft capital to work with. Yeah. But if they're serious about adding KD to that roster, and again, I would like to think that I'm pretty good at predicting when these types of things happen. KD's 37, right? You have to think there's maybe 1-2 more years worth of him being that 24+ point per game scorer. If that doesn't work, say Minnesota does end up getting him and it doesn't work, that'll be coming towards the end of Anthony Edwards' contract. And Anthony Edwards is a guy that I've linked with Brooklyn. I like to do this where I kind of try and predict what the next 2-3 years worth of star movement could look like, right? I said it 2 years ago. I said it was going to be, guys like Siakam, Giannis, Jaylen Brown potentially, Kevin Durant. Like these were all the guys that I had as potential trade candidates over the next 2 years, dating back from 2 years ago till today. And what has happened? Siakam ended up becoming a Pacer. Giannis rumors have begun. Jaylen Brown rumors have begun. Kevin Durant is definitely getting shipped out. All these things seem to kind of happen whenever I predict them. Over the next 2-3 years, I could see Devin Booker and Anthony Edwards being those top 2 superstars on the market that could be potentially moving on from their current teams. So, if that puts them in a position, meaning Brooklyn, to where that could be the star that you can go out and look to grab in 2027. I mean, you have to do everything right from now until then, and that starts by getting that second lottery pick, right? You have to take this draft and next draft seriously to build that core to where you're in a position for a guy like that once your guys are developed. So I'm keeping an eye on Anthony Edwards for Brooklyn. I think that's the most realistic superstar on the market for us right now in terms of 2 years down the line.
Okay. I don't want to get too far into the weeds. I want to stick on. I want to stick on this. So, your hunch is that Houston is the most realistic landing spot for Cam Johnson, or that should be their target.
I think that should be their target because I don't think they'll have to give up any of the future Phoenix picks for him, right? And I think the future Phoenix picks is what ultimately lands you Devin Booker. And if you grab Cam Johnson, who is a guy that has a great relationship with Devin Booker, and Devin Booker being a position of need for them, Jalen Green proved that he's not the guy, right? His playoff series sucked. He was horrible. He's also at the same caliber of level of Cam Thomas, right? Is he ever going to be a star? Is he just a sixth man that can score here and there? That's the conversation, right? And to me, Alperen Sengun is a star big man. This is a guy who can give you 18 and 10 a night, who can make very well every now and then, can give you a triple-double. Like, he has that upside. And if you are adding Devin Booker as your replacement for Jalen Green, while also having guys like Cam Johnson, Dylan Brooks, Amen Thompson, and the rest of that depth that they have, that's something that I think that they're going to value more than just, okay, let me go grab Kevin Durant to see if this is a quick fix for us for a year or two, and then have to figure it out after, right? Houston's at that youthful point in their, rebuild that you can say, where they're ready for a star, but they don't have to pounce on the first one that becomes available. So I think building out the rest of the roster for when that superstar that they really want is available, then I think the time comes, and I think that superstar for them is Devin Booker.
I'll just address this real quick. If Houston fails to get KD or Cam, would they be interested in Ice Trae?
Definitely not. It doesn't fit the.
I don't think so either.
System. Yeah. He's very particular in the guys that he likes, and I think Amen Thompson is going to be the starting point guard of that team moving forward. He can play make. He's not a guy that's going to be 25 plus per game, but he is kind of in that similar role, except with an immense amount of defensive upside, where you could kind of view him as like in a sense, a Halliburton. He may not have the exact vision and playmaking skills of Halliburton, but at his height, with his defensive ability, he can be that two-way point forward for you. And I think that's something that they're going to look to value, especially not knowing if Fred VanVleet's going to be back or not next year. They really don't know what's going on with Reed Shepherd. He's likely a guy that needs to be included in a star trade if they decide to do that this offseason, especially for Kevin Durant. And I don't think they're going to want to do that right away, right? Keep building through the draft and wait for that superstar that's really going to take you to the next level. And for me personally, I think that for them is Devin Booker. So your first step in getting Devin Booker is getting the guy that he absolutely adores, that he once played with, that once made a finals with, and that to me is Cam Johnson. Do I think Cam Johnson is Houston's number one priority? No. I think if there's a team that's most likely to get him, it's probably between San Antonio and Oklahoma City. People like to always say, why OKC, right? They just made a finals. They don't need him. It's simple. Look at Golden State's dynasty, right? They won a championship. They lost the championship, and they added Kevin Durant after, right? They didn't not make the finals. They were in the finals and still decided to add KD.
They won 73 games and went to the NBA Finals and lost in 7 games. Yeah.
Yep. And then they went out and got Kevin Durant, right? You always have to improve your roster if you want to be a dynasty one day. And I think that for OKC is the reason why they should look at Cam Johnson. Though the 15th overall pick isn't the flashiest pick for Brooklyn, especially knowing that you can probably get much higher in terms of that 10 through 15 range, OKC probably gives you the best value back, right? You're looking at, well,
let's start with this.
Yeah.
So we've talked about OKC, we've talked about San Antonio, we talked about Houston. Let's kind of deep dive into those 3 teams. Which one do you want to start with?
If you want, we can go in order. You want to pull up my post from the other day on Instagram? I have all the mock trades listed there.
Yeah, give me a minute.
It's on the 3rd row on the bottom left. 5 realistic draft lottery trade ups. Yeah, I have Houston, Portland, Atlanta, San Antonio, and OKC. So we'll kind of get into each of those. And
hang on one second.
Yeah, I think the Magic are definitely a team that looks into Trae Young. Yeah,
right. Is it right here?
Nope, right. The one down from that.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. 5 realistic draft lottery trade ups on the bottom left.
Okay, here it is. Yep. Okay.
All right. So if you click on the next slide, the first one that I have is the Houston mock trade. And again, a lot of these are preference based on my end, but I also do try and put some realistic aspects into it as well. Jabari Smith is on an expiring contract, right? You're going to have to pay him. Do you really want to pay him if you're Houston? I think Cam Johnson on that $20.5 million deal is definitely something that intrigues them. And again, like I said, if you can get Cam Johnson and 2 late first-round picks while keeping those future Phoenix picks, you're really in a position to go all in when that Devin Booker becomes available, right? And I think that's what's most important to them. So in this deal, I have Jabari Smith and Jock Landale as a salary filler, plus the 10th overall pick for Cam Johnson and Brooklyn's late first-round picks, the 26th and 27th overall. I think it's extremely realistic at this point in time. People were saying, why don't you just do Dillon Brooks in the 10th pick for Cam Johnson? Because that's kind of like shitting your pants and changing your shirt, right? Dillon Brooks is a playoff role player. You don't want to, get rid of a vet to add a vet. It really doesn't make sense, right? Jabari Smith really hasn't blossomed into what a lot of people thought he was going to be in Houston. This is a guy who is a top 8 pick, who was projected to be, a potential star in this league at some point in time, but he really hasn't gotten to that level of play in the system that he's in. So I think Jabari Smith is an extremely realistic, youthful prospect that Brooklyn could look into via trade this offseason or during draft night. I believe he has a team option, so I'm not sure if the deal can go through on draft night, unless if they do what they did with Fred VanVleet's team option and push it back a little bit. But ultimately, I think Jabari Smith is a guy that you should value a lot more than some people may, especially with the question marks around, is Noah Clowney the guy that you want as your future 4? I think having a friendly competition between him and Jabari could be very beneficial for both to figure out who should be the guy to take that next step and be the future, power forward of this team. And I think, again, for Houston, adding Cam Johnson you're looking now at picks 26 and 27. You can replace Jock Landale potentially with a guy like Danny Wolf, Maxime Reynaud. There's that Yannick Niedenhauser dude from Penn State they could potentially replace him with at that 27th overall pick. At 26, you could potentially be looking at guys like Noah Penda, Adu Fiaro. Like there's numerous guys that they could add at those spots to fill out the rest of the roster that could be incredibly beneficial for them. So I think that this is a very good deal for both sides. How do you feel about it?
To me, if we can get 10, this looks like a good trade for both teams. At 10, but first, let's look at Jabari Smith. Does Jabari Smith have a role on the Nets? He's still a young guy. I think he's just 21 years old. He's not a bad player. I mean, how would you
I think he's an immediate starter.
12 and 7. Yeah.
I think he's an immediate starter for Brooklyn, right? Because this is a guy that you're going to want to see if he can shape out to be the guy that you want him to be, right? So it's like an experimental year. You see if he's the guy that you give the contract to next offseason. If not, maybe you look to sign and trade. But either way, he's only 23, I believe. I definitely see him as a key young prospect.
He just turned 22 this month. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's still a kid, So I think that's a really good fit. If Brooklyn can land him in the 10th overall pick, that's huge.
No, and at the 10th pick, so I mean, is he a starting power forward? So then at 10, if we're assuming Conn Knippel at 8, which I am at this point, who are we looking at 10? Carter Bryant?
I would say Igor Demon, Carter Bryant, and Noah Senge. Those are the three guys that I really like at that 10th spot.
So it's Senge, Carter Bryant, and
Igor Demon.
Igor Demon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could live in that world. So we would lose 26 and 27, which I'm not that concerned about, but we would walk away with, and we would still have the 19th pick in the draft too. I like this for the Nets. At first, I wasn't sure, but we're keeping 19. So we're drafting 8, 10, and 19. Yeah, I can live in that world.
Yeah.
And
think about it this way, right? You could look at two different scenarios. You get Kneppel at 8, you get Demon at 10, and then you get Sorber at 19. Right? You get your point guard, you get your wing, and you get your center. And I think those are the three biggest needs currently. Right? Say there's a scenario where Fears does fall to 8. Okay, you grab Fears at 8. You grab one of Senge and Carter Bryant at 10, and then again you can grab a guy like Sorber or Rasheer Fleming at 19. Right? There's a ton of scenarios where if you land 8, 10, and 19, or 8, a pick between 10 through 15 and 19, where you could be really looking at 3 incredibly high upside youthful players for this team long term. So again, I think 10 through 15 is like a do or die for Brooklyn this year.
I like this. I do like this trade. I'd be in favor of this trade. Yeah, 26, 27. I'm saying if it makes sense for Houston, I don't see why this wouldn't make sense for Houston too. I mean, I think this does look like a realistic trade for all the reasons you just named. All right, you want to get to the next one?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Portland. This is an interesting one because Portland played really well down the stretch of the season. Portland has some players. They've got some bad contracts too that the Nets could take on. And they pick 11.
Yeah,
this is interesting to me. If Portland trades for Cam Johnson, they're signaling that they're looking to compete right away. Do you think Portland is looking to compete, at least be a playoff team in 2025?
It's interesting, right? Because the Portland one is just speculation. There is no truth to the matter of them looking to move the 11th pick. The one thing that I will say though is that they only have the 11th pick. Do they value grabbing a win now type of player in Cam Johnson while also adding an additional pick to their capital, right? So it's pretty much trading the 11th pick for 2 picks, right? So instead of having 1 pick in this draft, you'll have 2. And Cam Johnson kind of acts as your pick at 11, which, I mean, if you're grabbing a guy who could be considered your 4th option on a contender, I don't think that's really a bad option for them whatsoever. And especially knowing that you could play Denny at the 4, you could play Johnson at the 3. You would have, Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot as your 2 and your 1. You could look to maybe move Anthony Simons this offseason for additional depth. You still have Toumani Camara. You still have Ayton, who you could move off of. You still have Donovan Clingan as your center of the future. I think that's a really interesting move for them and something that they could look to potentially want. Now, do they maybe want a higher pick? I already saw Lou's comment. Do they want 19 and 36 rather than 27 and 36? I don't think moving up to 11 necessarily needs 19 and 27. I think if you were to do 19 and 36, that's more than okay. But to me, I think that this deal is fair for the most part, because you also have to look at Portland's youth, right? Like I said, they have Termani Kamara, they have Klingon, they have Scoot, they have Shaden, they still have Simons, they still have Denny. Like, these are all youthful players. How much more youth do you really need to add, right? So I think, ultimately, and again, this is a package that was kind of mixed with what Bleacher Report had put out. Bleacher Report's mock draft was the 11th pick, Robert Williams, and that 2030 swap straight up for Cam Johnson. I don't see that being realistic, right? I think that the Nets still have to attach picks to that, which is why I put 27 and 36 in there.
We would still have 19 and 26.
Yeah, which you could look to package up to potentially move up, maybe with a team, I don't think you could package those two up to move further up, because I don't think San Antonio would just take picks. I don't think OKC would just take picks. I don't think Orlando would just take picks. They have 4 picks in this draft total. And I wouldn't move 19 and 27 to move 2 spots up to 17. So at that point, you're kind of looking at 8, 11, 19, and maybe you look to trade 26 for, a future first-round pick. So you're taking 3 guys in this draft. I don't mind that. Maybe if a guy like Noah Penda's available at 26, I would look to keep that pick and keep him. But if there's nobody that you're really set on at 26, then 8, 11, and 19 could be a really good start to your rebuild while adding another future first-round pick with that 26 overall pick.
The Tennessee guard that the Nets brought in. Why is my brain short kidding?
Chaz Lanier.
Chaz Lanier. Is that a possibility at 26 or 27, or is that a second round guy, or what's, because the Nets brought him in, and I do want to spend some time. They brought Nick Clifford in as well. I want to spend some time with Chaz Lanier at 26 or 27. Is that a realistic thing, or why was he brought in?
I mean, you bring in almost all the players, right, throughout the entire draft process.
Yeah.
I don't hold any weight to guys that they bring in. 9 times out of 10, you're not landing the guy that you bring in.
Sure.
But Lanier, I would not take him in the first round now. I'm not wasting a pick on that. He's projected between 32 and 40. That falls perfectly in the range of 36. If you really want him at 36, go and grab him at 36. But I really would like to stay away from him. I'm not the biggest fan of him. He's an undersized 2 guard that can score. What does that remind you of? I don't like the repetitive players. I always like to, at least in my eyes, if I was a GM, I'm looking to continuously add different versatility pieces to this team, right? Like a 6'10" big in Thomas Sorber, a 6'7" wing in Con Kneppel, a 6'9" point guard in Igor Demon. Not one of those 3 players have a similarity to their game that the other does, right? Igor at 6'9" is your playmaker. Con is your floor spacer. Sorber is your 2-way center. Like, none of those guys have any specific combinations that compare to one another. So I think when you're looking to draft multiple players in a draft, you're looking at versatility. You're not looking for guys who already are currently on your team that have the same play style, right? You always want to have different play styles. Look at Indiana, right? You have Tyrese Halliburton, who's a primary facilitator, but can spark up from 3 at any time. You have Aaron Nesmith, Aaron Nesmith, who is a bully down low who could grab rebounds, but can also space the floor. He's not like Tyrese Halliburton. You have Andrew Nembhard, who is an inconsistent 3-point shooter, but is a very solid role player that does his job, whether that be, finding ways to create his own shot or play make, kind of similar to Halliburton, but not nowhere near his level. And he's also a much better defender than Halliburton. Like that's kind of how I look at it. You want to have versatility at every position. You don't want to have a mix and match of the same play styles on the floor at the same time. You want to have guys that can do a little bit of everything, guys who may value a certain aspect of the game a little bit more than one another. Like there's just different ways that I would look to build a team. So Chaz Lanier, to me, in short, no, I would not look to add him. He's a scorer and he's an undersized 4. So I'm not a big fan of him.
One of the other intriguing part of this to me is Robert Williams. Robert Williams is a guy when healthy, I absolutely love, but obviously the caveat there is when healthy.
Yeah.
His contract is not terrible, but it's terrible in the sense that he never plays. So what's the point, right? Like he doesn't play. Any value in Robert Williams, or is this just a salary filler who will never really play with the Nets?
Well, I think the value is his expiring contract, right? $13.2 million. That's additional cap space for next year's offseason, an offseason where Brooklyn could look to add a star through free agency.
Yeah, I meant, does he have any value to the Nets, or is this an expiring contract?
He's just an expiring contract. It's just a salary filler. You can maybe look to move him at the deadline for additional second-round draft capital. Who knows? There will be a team out there that values him because there are many teams in the league like the Lakers who need a center. So if you're in a position where you have that guy come trade deadline season and there's a team out there that needs a big for their playoff run, who knows what you can get in return for that. But yeah, I think that, between him and Jabari Smith's expiring contracts, that's already $25 million in projected cap space for 2026. And then you also have to factor in, what else you can maybe get. What if they go out and grab Porzingis in a 3-team trade where you send Claxton elsewhere? All right, well, now you're adding a $37.2 million deal next to that 25. That right there, you're at $62 million in cap space for the 26 offseason. And you're already in a position now where you can go and outright sign a superstar. So the potential is out of this world for what you can do in terms of adding prospects this year, adding draft capital this offseason, and gaining expiring contracts this season as well.
All right, this is intriguing to me. When you look at Robert Williams, this is a guy I like, but his career games played 32, 29, 52, 61, 35, 6, and 20. That is entirely useless. It's a player I like a lot.
It's a Zion Williamson game.
Yeah, I didn't realize he's got 2 years where he's played more than 35 games out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years. It's like that is crazy. And his contract's not all that bad, right?
Yeah, Boston killed him. He was dealing with that knee injury, and they didn't take it seriously. They brought him back weeks before he was supposed to come back from that sprained MCL or that partial torn meniscus, whatever it was that he had surgery for, and came back after like 3 weeks, played the playoffs. They killed his knee. So, he didn't play much this year. Hopefully it was a good enough amount of time to recover from it. But again, at a $13.2 million, if he barely plays, he barely plays. Doesn't hurt me. We're trying to not be good next year again. So
he's a great guy to have if you want to not be good, because he will have some trade value and he ain't going to play a whole lot of games. So it's actually, I think he's a good player, but he's a great tanking piece because he doesn't play, and he'll still have, if he does play, if he plays 30 games before the deadline, he'll have some value at the deadline because he is a premier rebounder. He's a premier defender. He's a really valuable player on a good team. He will have he's not going to have any value on the Nets, but he could have value elsewhere.
Yeah.
All right. The next trade is Atlanta. 13th, Terrence Mann, Georges Niang for Cam.
I was going to say, you're going to have to pull up the picture again.
Oh,
it's on the Rob Williams slide.
That would help. Yeah. All right. The 13th overall pick, and then that's received Mann and Niang for Cam Johnson, and the 27th overall pick. This is not my favorite of the trade because we're getting 13, not 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. Terrence Mann's a good player. Break this down for us. How do you assess this trade?
Yeah, again, it's really tough to figure out whether or not Demon, Bryant, and Esenge are truly all going to be top 12 picks. You would have to think one of them falls into that 13 through 15 range. And again, if all fails with the 10th and 11th trade potential options, if one of them falls to 13, I think that this is an incredibly realistic trade for both sides. Again, Atlanta has shown previous interest in Cam Johnson, and again, with how weak the East is next year, adding a guy like Cam Johnson next to Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, Zachariah Richeshai, and Trae Young could be a very interesting roster for them, at least for next season, right? Terrence Mann is on a 4-year deal, so Brooklyn would be eating at a long-term contract, but he's only making $15 million a year as of right now. So it's truly not a bad deal in terms of, future off-season cap space. It really doesn't kill you. Niang is on an $8.5 million expiring contract. So again, just free money, a guy that you could look to flip maybe at the deadline or buy out towards the end of the buyout period. But overall, at 13, again, you could be looking at one of Demon, Esenge, or Bryant to me. I think those are, definitely realistic options at that mark. And maybe a guy like Colin Murray Boyles is also still there. at 13. At 6'7", he doesn't have the offensive game that many want, but he is definitely one of the highest caliber defenders in this class. And if you are able to find a way to get Jeremiah Fears at 8, a guy like Murray Boyles makes sense if you were to move up to 13 and all those guys were off the board, right? Asenge, Bryant, or Demon. To me,
Fleming will be there probably at 13, right?
Fleming
Or
will
no?
definitely be there, but again, I don't think Fleming goes lottery. I don't. I don't
Okay.
think I think the earliest he can go is 14, which again, it's lottery, but I don't think San Antonio would look at that. I think San Antonio wants Dylan Harper and Colin Murray Boyles. So,
At 13
really
would also be a great place so you could take Aston Noel as well. You'd have him on the board.
you could. I personally wouldn't. Again, I'm not too high on him as a player. But it's not a bad option if you're looking for an upside project. It just, again, it really depends on what you get at 8, right? So you get Maluak at 8. Austin
Yeah.
Noel doesn't make sense. Murray Boyles really doesn't make sense. You need an offensive-minded player. At that point, I'm looking at Asenge or I'm looking at the playmaker and Demon. So I definitely think 1 or 2 of Asenge, Bryant, and Demon fall to 13. I'm just not sure how much further they fall after that.
All right, you want to get to the fourth one?
Let's do it.
San Antonio. Again, this is a trade I like a lot because we're getting the 14th overall pick, and we're getting Keldon Johnson. We're also getting a 2020 second round pick.
Yeah.
All right, I like this for Cam Johnson, for CJ, and the 27th overall pick. I like this trade. 26 and 27 is a little bit overkill to me because we keep the 19th and the 26th. So you got the 20. I really, at that point, I'd rather move on the 27th, or they keep drafting rookies. This is probably my favorite trade because I think Keldon Johnson is a young piece who, no matter what your offensive system is, he kind of fits it. Mm-hmm. He's on a decent contract, and you're getting the 14th pick, which again,
that's that Sorber, Fleming, Asenge.
Basically guaranteed you're getting Sorber. If you get 14, Sorber's not going to go before 14, you wouldn't think, right? So if you want Sorber, basically guarantee that you can get him. Plus, you're bringing in Keldon Johnson, who's only like 26, right? He's still fairly young.
Well, I think Keldon Johnson's a guy that would probably get shipped out before the season even begins because we know it. He doesn't have any desire to play in New York City. He's stated it, I believe, to you, right, that he doesn't like New York City.
He says, I hate New York. I'm glad that trade didn't happen. Is the exact that's an exact quote.
Yeah. And if that's the case and that's how he feels and he makes that blatantly obvious, maybe you can just look to ship him out in the offseason for, maybe you can include him in a deal for Porzingis, to get that expiring contract from them. So, it doesn't hurt to get him, whether he stays or not. He's making $3 million less than Cam Johnson on the same length of contract. So it really doesn't really do anything for us. But getting that 14th pick, again, it could be something of importance. Say Washington decides to pass on Derek Queen or Maluak at 6, then you're looking at them at 18 as the prime suspect for Sorber. So if you feel that Sorber is the center that you want, maybe trading up to 14 isn't a bad option. It's a bit of a reach at 14, but again, if you'd prefer to grab him rather than lose him to Washington, and I've said this all along, I think this is a 3 big man draft. If you don't land one of Maluak, Queen, or Sorber, it's really not worth going out and grabbing a guy with your first 3 picks. At that point, just grab best available and, maybe grab a veteran big at the 36 spot, whether that be Kalkbrenner, Niedenhauser, Hanson Yang. Like, it doesn't really matter to me at that point. Just go and grab a guy that can play the backup big. But to me, I think Sorber is a guy with incredible upside. So if you have to reach on him a bit, especially if Washington passes on a big at 6, then I think that's definitely a realistic target for Brooklyn at 14.
Lou thinks that San Antonio would laugh at this trade. You're trading.
You're moving 13 spots down for an improved role player on a team that's looking to contend. I don't really see how they say no to this. This is practically the offer that they gave us at the deadline. I don't think that there's anything unrealistic about it. And not to mention, too, Brooklyn was kind of set on getting both of those Atlanta swap picks at the deadline, which one of those picks is that 14th pick, and the other one is for 2026. If they really want to move off of Johnson to move up for a second lottery pick, this deal makes all the sense in the world.
So far, well, I'll let you rank them when we're done, so I'll hold on. But Alex Torres says, saw from the Chicago radio, Patrick Williams and 12 for Cam Johnson. Bulls may want to get rid of the salary. What do you think? It's coming from Chicago right? So this is a hometown trade for them.
Yeah, I think Chicago is going to be a bit more expensive to move up with because Chicago doesn't have a second first round pick, right? So you're probably looking at 19, 27 and Johnson to move up to 12, and you're still eating that bad contract in Patrick Williams. I'm not really a fan of it. I don't think Chicago's necessarily going to want to move off of 12. Maybe they look to package Patrick Williams, and some future draft capital to move up into the late first round. I can see that maybe happening, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't look to work with Chicago, especially if it entails Williams' contract there.
Let me Williams. Patrick Williams' contract. How bad is Patrick Williams' contract? I know they want to move.
It's not horrible in terms of money, but it's a long.
That's pretty bad. It's 5 years, $90 million for Patrick Williams. That's a pretty bad contract. Yeah. I'll be straightforward. That's pretty bad. Yeah. How much is left on that?
I believe 3 years.
He signed it last year or 2 years ago.
I believe it was 2 years ago. I believe it was 2 years ago, but it was on his rookie deal, right? So the first year of the deal was still his rookie money, and then it was the 4 years of that deal. And I think the start of the 4 years was last year. So I believe he has 3 years left on the deal. Also, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Patrick Williams contract has a player option until 28, 29, where he's making $18 million a year. Yeah, I'm gonna pass. I'm gonna pass on this.
It looks like he got the extension actually his second to last year of his rookie deal. So it was like a 6-year combined deal, and the 4 years now starts this year. So yeah, I would definitely.
Hang on, let me. I'm getting 12, and I'm keeping 19. I'm keeping all my picks.
Well, that's just a radio show host saying what he would think to do, right? I think Chicago is not going to want to move a young player and their only first round pick of this year's draft for Cam Johnson, right? They're going to want 26 and 27, or maybe they'll want 19 and 36. Like, I wouldn't do that for that. Terrence Mann I like better on a long-term deal rather than rather than Chicago's deal.
Fair enough. That's the wrong one. Hang on real quick. Hang on 1 second. I just closed out the wrong one. All right, give me 1 second. You gotta have patience for a slightly retarded man.
It happens, man. It happens.
Yeah. I just closed out the wrong one.
Hey, that's all good. We only got one more anyway, so.
Hang on. Final trade, OKC, 15th overall pick, Isaiah Joe, Kenrich Williams, and the 2026 1 for Cam Johnson and a 2028 second-round pick.
Don't forget the 15th overall pick is in there as well. So Brooklyn would pretty much be getting 2 first-round picks plus Isaiah Joe for Cam Johnson. I think, again, I said it before, if you truly are trying to build a long-term championship caliber roster, you need to continuously improve the roster year after year. Isaiah Joe just played 5 minutes last night for OKC, or 2 nights ago, in their closing game to head to the finals. They have too much youth on that team. Nikola Topic is coming to play next year, who was a top 15 pick last year, who they didn't play at all this year because he tore his ACL prior to the season, right? They have too much youth, and it really depends on the youth that they want to continuously bring back in. You could replace Joe with Aaron Wiggins. It really doesn't matter. But one of those 2 guys plus Kenrich Williams as a salary filler, to me, is a deal that makes a ton of sense for both sides. And not to mention, Jalen Williams also showed that he is one of the most inconsistent fucking scorers come playoff time that there is. And I think Cam Johnson could be a guy that can kind of help that out a bit, just as a floor spacer, a guy who could also put the ball on the floor and play make a bit. I think that really fits in with the rest of the rotation that they have moving forward with them. Opening up next year with a starting 5 that consists of SGA, Cam Johnson, Jalen Williams, Chet, and Isaiah Hartenstein, with guys like Caruso, Dort, one of either Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins, plus Topic and others off the bench. That, once again, is your championship favorite. So I think that this is a deal that makes a ton of sense. And to clarify with the 2026 pick, that is top 4 protected. I would have OKC adding an additional 6 spot protection onto it, right? So if the pick is top
Okay.
4, it goes back to the team that I think is it Philly or is it Indy? It's
It's
Indy,
Philly.
right?
It's Philly.
Oh, okay, it is
Top
Philly.
10 protected from Philly. Yeah.
Right. So say the pick is top 4, then it would go back to Philly. If it's 5 through 10, it would go back to OKC. If it's 11 or higher, it would go to Brooklyn. That's how I have it, which I think is more than fair. So to me, I think that this is one of the better value trades that you can get for Cam Johnson. Right? It's not the necessary lottery pick that you're looking at, but it's the pick right after. And if a guy like a Senge, Demon, Carter Bryant, if one of those guys fall to 15, and you're also able to add an additional first-round pick and Isaiah Joe, I think that's something incredibly beneficial for Brooklyn, while also giving that win now piece to OKC for them to continue their championship reign.
All right, so we've gone over all 5 trades, plus we've entertained another hypothetical trade from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Let's focus on these trades. To you, which trade do you think is the most realistic? A, and B, if you could wave a magic wand, which one would you make? Which is your favorite one? Not necessarily the most realistic one, but if you could have your pick, if all of these were offered to you, which would you take?
I think the 2 most realistic, surprisingly, is Atlanta and OKC.
Okay.
I think Atlanta, again, is going to be a team that looks to contend this year because of how open the East is, right? Again,
Yeah.
Boston is likely not a top 6 team next year. Milwaukee, if they lose Giannis, is 1,000% not a top 16, not a top 6 seed this year. So you're potentially looking at Atlanta as a top 6 seed next year. And if they think that could be something that could come true, then Johnson makes a ton of sense, right? Like I said, you would have, you could play Young at the 1, Johnson at the 2, Richiche at the 3, Jalen Johnson at the 4, and Onyeka at the 5. It's a very versatile group of players that also adds floor spacing, playmaking, defensive upside. It gives you everything that you need to kind of contend. And then on the other hand, of course, OKC, I think if they want to keep this championship reign of terror that they've been on the last 2 years in terms of just absolutely decimating the regular season, now, of course, being rewarded and going to the finals, I think adding a guy like Cam Johnson makes a ton of sense for them as well.
No, it does, because he's still reasonable. He's not old. He's not young anymore, but he's not old either. He definitely fills a need for OKC. He fills a role. He's a shooter. Shooters usually last. Cam Johnson makes a lot of sense to OKC, and they obviously have plenty of picks that the Nets would want. The OKC trade, I do think, even though it's not my favorite trade, is the most realistic. I think OKC, regardless of whether or not they win the championship, I think that makes the most trade, right? If you win a championship, you're not going to sit there and be idle.
Yeah, you don't want to just sit there and stay stagnant and run things back, right? The league's going to improve, whether that be KD to San Antonio or Minnesota. Maybe it's Giannis
and it's going to be in the West too. Like the league's going to improve.
Everybody's going to try and improve because now you are the team that teams are trying to build their rosters around to contend with. So as a contender and as a team that's at the top of their game, looking to improve the roster year after year is something that you need to do to continuously win a championship. Look at Boston, for example.
Yep.
They added nothing to that roster and their core this season, right? They still had Pritchard, they still had Porzingis, they still had Horford, they still had White, they still had Holiday, they still had Tatum, they still had Brown, and that was it, right? They've added nothing to their roster, and they lost in the second round of this year's playoffs. That's what happens when you don't improve the teams.
As a trend, Golden State in 2018 was the last team to advance beyond the second round the year after they won the championship. Toronto got bounced in the second round. The Lakers, I think, got bounced in the first round.
Yeah, that was the first time ever LeBron lost in the first round.
Golden State, they didn't get. I think they lost in the first round or second round. You've seen this trend now. Denver can't get past the second round. Boston just got bounced in the second round. So, the league is very competitive, and you can't just sit there and rest and say, okay, we won it this year, so therefore we'll be back in the Western Conference Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals next year. It hasn't worked that way. There's too much competitive balance in the league. I want to bring in LBL. I haven't heard from LBL in a minute, so we kind of went over these trades. Give me your thoughts, LBL.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be the guy that's to the center because I feel like looking at OKC, there's no reason to get Cam Johnson. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't even see Cam Johnson as really, if he is, it's marginally a better player than Isaiah Joe. So why are they going to go out and spend, 25 million a year on Cam Johnson when even if they don't like Joe and they want to get rid of him or something, or they want to package him and Kenrich Williams and a pick, I feel like they can get a better player than Cam Johnson. That's my thing. I think you said, well, you said because so and so was up and down, Williams was up and down, but that's the thing. They're the youngest team in the league. They're playing with house money, so I think that they can afford to play the waiting game. And then, if they start sputtering next year or somebody starts doing something, all of that is still available to them. Every trade in the world is still available to them as long as they have all of those picks. And I think that if we're looking at them having the 15th pick, they might actually pick a player who's better than Cam Johnson. It might take them a little bit longer to develop them, but I
See,
don't
but that's the
see.
problem, right? And
Right.
and, sorry to interrupt, but I got to step in.
Mhm,
If you continuously are drafting players, like look at it this way: Topic
mhm.
is a guy who was drafted in the top 14 this year.
Yeah,
He tore his ACL a month before the NBA draft. He was eligible to play. He's been healthy for at least 3-4 months, and they didn't even use him. He hasn't even touched the NBA floor yet. And this is a guy that
yes.
they just drafted in the lottery last year, right? They're
But
picking
how
one
is
spot outside of the lottery.
but
How are
how
they
is
going to
that a
draft a guy
bad?
to play this year
Okay,
when they
but
don't
what
have the
I'm
roster
saying
spot?
is, no, I'm saying, but how is that a bad thing for them? It's like
It's horrible
Topich,
for the development and the progression of a player, right?
yeah,
It's
but
kind
if
of
they,
similar to San Antonio with the second pick, right? You have Stephon Castle, who just won Rookie of the Year, who looks to be a potential star in this league at the point guard and shooting guard position. And you're in a position where you're going to add Dylan Harper most likely.
well,
It's
the one,
going to take
the,
away from the progression of both of those players, and at some
but,
point in time, you kind of have to pick and choose between one of them.
Let me give you an example, LBL. Let me give you an
but,
example from our day, right? Jermaine
yeah.
O'Neal on Portland. They had Detlef
Mhm,
Schrempf. They had the roster monster. They had all these power forwards. Jermaine O'Neal
mhm.
was a great player, right? But they didn't have a role for him. So they could keep him on the bench and never use him, or they could try to move him for something that can help them win a championship immediately. Like
Well,
what's got
I'm gonna say we actually didn't know if he was a great player at that point.
you didn't, but you know he's a great
So,
talent, right? He was drafted out of high
yeah,
school.
yeah,
He was a great talent. Yeah.
yeah, but we didn't know he was going to develop the way he did at Indiana. And what I'm saying is with these guys, I'm saying they're playing with house money. I'm not saying that they got to keep upgrading their roster for a younger guy every single year, but I'm just saying I don't think Cam Johnson is going to make a difference. And I told John that during, when we were talking all during the season, and everyone's like, you need to trade. The one weakness of them is 3-point shooting. They need to get Cam Johnson. Look how far they made it without getting Cam Johnson. So I'm saying if they're going to lose this series to Indiana or the Knicks or whoever it is, I don't think Cam Johnson is the freaking difference maker. That's what I'm saying. I think if they were to lose this series, I think they might turn around and maybe get a better package and get a better player. That's what I'm saying.
I think they still have that package. They still have the picks, right?
No, no, I'm saying,
They
yeah. No, I'm just
like
saying I think they would go out
to
and get
me,
a better player.
I think personally, to me, OKC should have been the team that went all in on Giannis, whether that was this offseason or next, whenever he becomes
Yeah,
officially available.
but that's
And I think that
a
still
better
gives you that
player.
opportunity,
No,
right?
no,
Because
I'm not denying that. I'm just saying
look
I'm
at it
saying
this way,
this
right?
seems
You're
kind of
gonna have to
myopic from the Nets' point of view. That's all I'm saying. Like,
yeah
yeah,
think about it in this
give us
sense.
what we want.
Yeah, think about it in this sense. You have Jalen Williams and Chet who are due extensions, right? That's going to
Yes.
be between those two and SGA's extension. That's going to be a combined over 165 million in cap space used up just on those three players, right? So at some
Yeah.
point you have to pick between Jalen Williams and Chet. Adding
Hmm.
Cam Johnson this year at least gives you a guy on a shorter term deal than Isaiah Joe, but also a better fit and winning caliber player than Isaiah Joe is. So it's an improvement in terms of the role player, but it's also a money saver for an additional 2 years. Um, and what I see with that is Cam Johnson there now allows you to say, okay, do we really need Jalen Williams or do we really need Chet? Because Giannis is here, we can package one of those guys up and still have that team to contend, right? So
Hmm.
I think at some point they need to look to improve the youth into win now role players, and a guy just making $20.5 million for 2 more years definitely seems
Okay.
like something that could be of interest, right? Because Kenrich Williams
Well,
barely
I,
played.
I'm just gonna I'm gonna
And for
agree to
good reason, he barely
disagree.
plays.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna agree to disagree because I think that if you want a win now player, yeah, Giannis is that guy. Cam
Yeah.
Johnson is not that guy. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well,
If they're
that's
gonna
why I'm.
go
Well,
all
let me
in,
push back. Let me push
let
back.
them really go in.
Like, Cam Johnson is not winning you a championship. He's not carrying your team. But
I
if you
know I'm
already
not.
have a good team and you're just lacking shooting, Cam Johnson's a nice little fit for you. Like, I'm not even a Cam Johnson fan, as you well know, right? Like, I'm not a
Mhm.
Cam Johnson fan, but I don't like Cam Johnson because they traded Kevin Durant for him, right? Like, but if
Yeah, well,
you're
I
close,
get
if you're competing and you're lacking shooting, Cam Johnson's a nice fit for you.
I don't see that there. I see him, I don't really see it. For me, I don't really see it. And now I'm looking at your other trade because I missed some of the trades, but I'm looking at I just came on, so I just listened to you, Dylan, when you said Cam Johnson to Atlanta,
Mhm.
and I'm like, Cam Johnson as a two guard, he can't even guard threes. How is he gonna guard a two? He can't even keep threes in front of him. How's he gonna play two guard?
I mean, realistically, when you have 4 guys at 6'8" or higher, and Johnson, Ricochet, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu, I don't really think it matters too much who's playing what specific position. And you also have to
Well, I
remember
think it
how
does.
lackadaisical Trae Young is on defense,
I,
right? And I
I
think that's
understand, but
where
I think it does
the help
matter.
comes in.
But I think it does matter in terms of, you definitely need a guy that could keep people in front of him. And I'm saying, even though you might have the shot blocking with the other guys, it's like, you know, that it's problematic. I think that you need at least some kind of ball stopper or something, So I mean, in a
And
defensive
I kind of
sense.
see that as just a team putting in a team effort, right? Look at Indiana. They don't have like your set in stone high caliber defensive player, right? There's not one of those guys on that team that's considerably a top 10 defender in the league. But you have
Well,
Aaron Nesmith, you have Nemhard, you have
mhm.
Turner, you have Pascal. All these guys can guard very well. And say one does get passed by, right? All right, well, you have Pascal or Turner down low to help you out. You've got Nemhard or Nesmith out there on the perimeter that can recover and contest the
Well,
shot. Like
I,
that's
I'll say
kind of how I
I'll
see it.
say this. I'll say the
And you
Naismith
also have
is turning
to remember
into,
Dyson's still there. Dyson's still
but
there.
Naismith is turning into a great defender, and
Yeah.
so is, because these guys were still young, so they're turning it. Like I don't think Cam Johnson will ever see, be a defensive guy like these guys. And one of the things that you're also looking at, like moving forward, say someone like OKC, is we kind of concentrate on the stars a lot, like like on the highest, picks. Like we got SGA, and then we got Chet, and then we got Williams. But also like a guy like what makes life so easier is when they have what's the guy from Duke? Cason Wallace?
Nah, he didn't play
That
at Duke.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was it,
Um,
Kentucky?
yeah, he
It
was a
was a
Kentucky
blue
kid.
chip.
Yeah, he
It's a
was a
blue chip
Wildcat.
guy. But what I'm saying is his game is so much easier because all they're saying is run out there and play some 94 feet defense. And anything that you give.
Oh, I think we lost him.
Did we lose LBL real quick?
We, in fact, lost him. We have a man down.
All right, man down.
Sorry
Oh,
about
he's back.
that.
He's back.
There
You
we go.
guys can still hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got you loud and clear.
Can you guys still hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah,
All
we
right.
can hear
you
you.
guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Let me leave and come back.
All right. Where did he leave off? Basically,
Why Johnson isn't really a good fit for Atlanta, but I was gonna say I forgot they have Dyson Daniels. I mean, Dyson's your starting two.
yeah,
Dyson's a top 10 defender in the league. So
Yeah.
you would have Trey, Dyson, Johnson, Ricochet, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka. Like it's an intriguing team. And I don't really think it matters about the starting minutes between Ricochet and Johnson. You need to fill out the rest of the roster to be able to contend, right? Johnson is an immediate improvement over a guy like Karis LeVert. So and Levert's a free agent this year. So you realistically, and Johnson's also an improvement over Terrence Mann. He's also an improvement over Niang. So again, you have to build out the depth of the roster, whether that's Ricochet or Johnson coming off the bench as the backup 3. I think regardless, it's still an improvement for their roster. And like I said, on a roster that's looking to contend within a weak Eastern Conference right now, it makes sense for them to try and do it. So I know that they've had previous interest in Johnson in the past. I would expect it to reappear around draft night as well.
With, Giannis probably going to the West, with Boston as the man down, teams like Toronto, teams like Atlanta, I think are going to start to look to compete immediately, right?
Mhm.
I don't know what that means for the Nets exactly. I don't know.
I mean, Toronto already has the roster too.
Yeah.
Like they held out Brandon Ingram last year just to get this pick,
Teams like the Nets and Washington are terrible. I don't know what this means for them, but Charlotte, Charlotte's got players. Like we've talked about this even last year. Like Charlotte's not bad at all. Does Charlotte look to compete? The East is going to be so wide open. You think you would assume Detroit and Atlanta would be the two obvious teams that take a step forward. Orlando,
you would have to think Orlando, Detroit, Indiana, and Atlanta are the 4 Eastern Conference teams that look to improve their rosters. You would have to think Toronto then enters that picture of playoffs or high-end play-in team, right? So that you're already looking at. I think Cleveland's going to still be in that top 6. New York is going to be in that top 6. That's 2. You have Detroit, Orlando, Indiana. That's already your top 5. And then you would probably be adding Toronto, Atlanta, and then that's your top 7 already. So
I like the Houston thing.
Yeah, I think Houston's the best.
But the only thing is, it seems like an awful lot we're getting. Because I would trade.
Ideally, it's 10 and Jabari for Johnson in 26-27. Landale's just a salary filler.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I think he hasn't
scratched
played
the
up.
surface of what
He hasn't played. Yeah, but he definitely is. Like when he's either gonna bust, or he's gonna get really, really good. Jabari Smith.
And that's the thing, too.
Talent is there.
Guys, and that's the thing. You see guys in certain organizations that just don't improve because of the lack of development and, play style that they need to develop their game. Change in scenery helps players left and right. We've seen it with numerous players.
And under Ime, who seems more like a win now guy,
mm-hmm.
I see this as more acceptable to him. Like he'll say, I need Cam because I need to win right now. I don't see, so I don't see him being patient with Jabari Smith.
Yeah.
And we can afford to be patient with Jabari Smith.
Yeah, 100%. And I see Lou's comment on the screen, and there's a simplistic explanation for this. It's because most organizations aren't a bunch of fat pussies. Sorry, I've been trying to hold back on the language all day, but the 76ers organization is a fucking joke. They're a pathetic excuse of an organization. They have 3 all-stars on their team, and they purposefully tanked for a top pick, and they were rewarded for it. Not only is the NBA a bunch of pussies, but so is the 76ers. So that's all I got to say about that.
I want to adjust that real quick with Philly. I mean, we just always overlook Philly because it was so bad this year. I mean, where does Philly fit in the East next year? I mean, like the East,
they're going to be top 8 as well. Yeah. There's no excuse for them not to be, and if they're rewarded again for it, I'm sorry, but Adam Silver needs to resign immediately.
Do they look to go all in? Does Philly look to go all in and try to win the East? I mean, if they're trying to win the East this year,
I mean, they're a team that makes sense for Kevin Durant, Paul George, and the 3rd overall pick straight up for KD. It makes sense.
I think so too.
Will they do it? I don't know, right? Because you could be getting the younger KD and Ace Bailey that you could build around long term with Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain.
And you got to trade it if you want to rebuild with Maxey, McCain, and Ace. That's fine. Then Embiid's got to go. You got to. I feel like you got to make a decision one way or the other now. Like if you wait till the season starts, Embiid's going to lose even more value. I don't know. His value took a massive hit from a year ago to where it is now. You should have traded him last year. Like a year ago, right? Now, if you said, I'm going to play Embiid one more year, he plays 35 games. He plays fantastic in the 35 games that he plays, but he plays 35 games, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get bounced in the first round. like there's no more value, right? Like we're just talking about like what's Kevin Durant's value? Well, Kevin Durant's been relatively healthy. Embiid is not, and now what is he going to be next year? 33? You know, it's like the time to get any value for him has passed. You
Yeah,
know,
I want to pull up this comment from Alex real quick too, just because I saw him ask it earlier. Financially, the trade doesn't work. Houston would have to cut an additional $4.1 million. I'm looking at it right now in the trade machine. You can't package up Landale, Holiday, and Whitmore for.
And
for
I wouldn't want those two guys for Cam. I would want Jabari. Even I'll tell you this.
I think
I'll tell you
Jabari just
this.
makes the most sense because
Even without the pick, even without the 10th pick, I would probably do Jabari's contract.
I would
because
need
that-
at least some form of draft compensation for it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because what I'm saying is Jabari is a talent, but he's a guy that,
It's an untapped potential that hasn't been tapped
yeah,
into yet.
and he's and if we think and it definitely will make Clowney it'll make Clowney a backup.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what I said at the beginning too. It kind of brings in that friendly competition for both of them to make one another better, right? Because they both play a similar role. They both play the same position. Sometimes you need that extra kick in the ass to be able to take that next step. And for one of them, it hopefully will work. For the other, well, you'll be in a trade package here on my page in the next year and a half. So,
But I do see one thing. I think I saw it on Twitter, right, where somebody said, what is it? Jabari's, but you have to figure out what are you going to pay him because his deal is up, right?
yeah, he's on a team option deal this year, which can be accepted so he can play his last year out in his for his rookie contract, and then he's doing an extension. The extension is probably going to be 25 plus million. That's usually what it ranges with.
Minimum, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
I
if
mean,
he has
in all honesty, at 23 years old, which is going to be the time frame that he's going to get that contract, it's not the end of the world.
no, it's a better deal than paying
30-year-old
Cam
Cam
Johnson.
30 plus million. Yeah, because he's now extension eligible too. He's due. Johnson signed a $30 plus million deal this offseason. Right? Who would you rather? 30-year-old Cam Johnson at 30 million, or would you rather 23-year-old Jabari Smith at 25 million? I'll take my chance with the kid.
And Jabari does play defense.
Yeah.
He does play defense. He can hit the three. And he just needs more development. He really needs, I mean, that's the problem with some of these young guys. They just come out too early before they know what they're really doing. I mean, what's his career high season average? Like 14 or 15 or something?
Let's see.
Something like that, and he's still young.
Throughout his career, he's averaged 13.7.5 rebounds. He's played 31 minutes a night. He's also a guy
that's what I'm saying. That's
75 plus games twice. This past season, he played 57.
But that's like without even being like, it's like he just did that from the bat.
Yeah, his career high is 34 points. He's had 3 30-point games. I mean, he's showed off a good. I mean, he's had 25 20-plus point games. You know what I think I feel like he's underrated because during this time of year when his draft came up, they kept going back and forth between him and Banchero, and because Banchero turned out to be such a great player so young, they look at Jabari like he's a failure or disappointment. Yeah. And not to mention too, his career high in rebounds is 18. He's had 25 or more 12 plus rebound games. Like he's versatile. This is a guy that could genuinely be, if he is able to reach his max potential, he likely is a guy that can give you 20 and 12 a night. Right? But that's if he's properly developed. At this point in his career, he's more likely a guy to be like 16 and 9, which is still a reliable starting power forward in this league.
Yeah.
Because he can also space the floor.
Yeah, he could be like probably like what's his name from Memphis, JJJ, something like that.
Yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah, I don't know if he has the defensive upside of Jackson, but he definitely has the floor spacing ability to where he can be, very beneficial to any team that he's on. But yeah, I mean, there's
he's
still a
in
ton of
that.
potential with him.
Yeah, and then what's his name is just bigger, Mobley.
Yeah,
he's just more physical. But I'm saying those are the new breed. It's like some of these guys the power forwards are coming back now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
you might need a guy like that. So I mean, I would definitely look into that trade. And if we're able to get the 10th pick because they want, and that's the thing with the Rockets, because of what you're saying, the Rockets might want that cap relief, so they might rather pay the 26th and 27th guy than
Then the
having
10th guy.
the
Yeah.
10th guy.
The 26th and 27th will probably be half the cost combined.
Yeah,
for them.
I'll look it up. I'll try to look it up now real quick.
So that might be a cost saver for them, you know.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
it is a win. It is a go all in move for the Rockets.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're still keeping all of that Phoenix future draft capital. And like I said earlier, they're not as interested in Kevin Durant, or at least they won't look to make a similar package to a team like maybe Minnesota or San Antonio. So to me, I don't think Houston is in that picture anymore for Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And that to me shows you're looking for a younger superstar when the time comes. And that to me is Devin Booker. And how do you get Devin Booker? Well, you have Phoenix's draft capital. How do you lure Devin Booker to wanting to come to Houston? Go grab the guy that he made a finals with. And I think that's something that could really be beneficial for both.
Well, what would they have out?
You would
let's
probably
say,
be packaging Jalen Green, Cam Whitmore, and Reed Shepard, plus those
for
Suns
Kevin
picks
Durant.
back. No. For
Oh.
Booker, it would probably be Jalen Green, Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepard. So you'd be getting your point guard, shooting guard, small forward. Plus you'd be getting all of your picks back, right? So whether that's like 3 or 4, whatever they have.
I got it here.
Durant
The
is-
26th and
Durant is a
27th
risk.
pick.
Mhm.
The 26th and 27th pick would make 2.4 and 2.3 million. So that's 4.7. And the number 10 pick would make 5. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah.
Little
So
bit
they're
of a save.
saving
Yeah.
a little. And,
You
what
get
I would
two,
say
two
is,
roster spots, not one. Yeah.
I would
Yep.
say for the Rockets, Durant is a risk. You know,
100%. It's a small window.
you know, because at his age, and his proclivity for getting hurt, you know, in the last 5 years, it's like, man, you're taking a risk. You're going all in for him.
Nope.
And you're killing some of your depth at the same time. So I think that's a risk for Houston. You know what I mean? I can see the team that should really probably look at KD would be San Antonio. You know?
Yeah. Do you think if San Antonio got KD and they kept the number 2 pick and that was not a part of it, do you think that they're ready to win a championship with their roster with Fox and Wemby as currently constituted?
I 100% think they're ready.
But
The reason why I think the Spurs,
how could they get him without giving up the 2 pick?
because Kevin Durant's 37 years old, he's not worth the 2nd overall pick anymore. You know, KD's worth 2 first-round picks.
I know. I
and-
mean,
and
but
players.
who else do they have?
They still got 14.
They
They
would get the
still got
14.
14
Devin
this year.
Vassell.
Yeah.
They would have
Devin
Devin
Vassell.
Vassell, Jeremy Sochan, which are 2 young players. You could package one of either Harrison Barnes or Keldon Johnson into that. So you're
Okay,
getting
so
3
you're saying
players plus the 14th pick, plus maybe
You're
1 or
saying-
2 future picks.
okay, so you're saying everyone except for the
core
second
4.
pick
Yeah.
and the top 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah. Right? Because
Well,
think
I
about it
mean,
this way. If you
yeah.
add KD to a roster that consists of Castle, Harper, Fox, and Wemby, along with whatever depth they're able to fill out with, you're at least contending for 2 years. Okay, Kevin Durant
Yeah.
retires. Well, Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper should be fully developed by then. At that
Yeah.
point, you're probably thinking, okay, do I want to trade De'Aaron Fox for another star at the wing position so I can pair Castle and Harper as my star guards? Or do I want to maybe move off of one of those youthful guys who are becoming stars to add a star wing and then, have each of them play their full minutes, right? Because I think at the end of the day, keeping Castle and Harper is pure stupidity for them. I don't think Castle should be a full-time starting 3. He's too small for that. He's also not as good defensively to be a full-time 3. He's great defensively, but not that great. Like I don't see where that works for him. And I also think playing him and Harper together along with Fox completely ruins whatever development you're trying to get. Out of Harper
I
as
don't
starting-
I
as a
don't
starting
see
point guard.
them even if they made the trade where they kept the 2. I
Mhm.
feel like they would for Durant. I feel like they would still end up trading the 2 for somebody like a
The
like
only
a
thing I can
veteran
see them
star.
trading the second pick for is Giannis.
Yeah.
So unless if
yeah.
that comes out in the next 3 weeks that he wants out,
Yeah.
then I don't see it happening. Which
Yeah.
it's a win-win for San Antonio. Okay, you can either trade the pick for Giannis and get your guy now, or you can keep Dylan Harper, and at some point next season, you could package Dylan Harper or Stephon Castle plus a load of picks for Giannis. Like either way, they should still be the front runner for Giannis no matter what.
All
That's
right,
if they
as
don't
far
get
as
KD though.
all right, so far as us, you spoke about the Atlanta deal, you spoke about the Rockets deal, and you
Mhm.
spoke about what are the you said there were 3 deals, right?
There was 5
Oh,
total.
five
It
deal,
was
5 deals.
Houston, Portland, Atlanta, San Antonio, and OKC.
What's the Portland deal?
Portland was Bleacher Report originally put out a mock trade that was the 11th pick, Robert Williams, and a 2030 first round pick swap straight up for Cam Johnson. I don't think that that's fair. So I did the same package from Portland for Cam Johnson picks 27 and 36 or 26 and 36. Portland only has 1 pick in this year's draft. So ideally adding a guy who can play really well alongside, Scoot Henderson, Denny Avila, Donovan Clingan, makes sense. But you also probably have to give us some draft capital as well. So I would be open for it if that was to be realistic. But
I like this trade. I just don't see it. I don't see Portland trading the 11th pick.
The only thing that I can see Portland doing maybe is trading the 11th pick for say San Antonio wants to move 3 spots up, right? And they give up 14 and then that second round pick. Okay, that makes sense.
You know what's funny? In the last 48 hours or so, I reminded someone because I guess they were talking about, all of this Jordy stuff, right? And I said, and I was, I know it was because I was saying, whenever you keep blaming marks and size, you gotta make it a 3-headed monster. So I said the thing is, when you think about it, what's the Utah coach's name?
Will Hardy.
Who's the Utah? Yeah, Will Hardy and Chauncey. They just got extensions for tanking.
Yeah.
So that means they did their job the right way instead of trying to add on wins. And that's my point with Jordy,
Me and Dylan, we got to wrap. We're running a little late.
All right, guys.
Dylan, are you free this weekend? When do you want to come back on?
Yeah, I should be free. We can aim for, let's say, Saturday or Monday.
Okay, yes.
So tomorrow or Monday. Yeah. We'll talk about it tonight.
All right, cool. All right. Sounds good. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Later,
Appreciate you.
All right.
May 30th, 2025 from Texas. Good show today, Dylan. Good show today.
Appreciate it, man. You as well.
John, you got an invite if you want to come on and talk about Zion trades. May 30th,
time to be alive.
2025, Texas to the world. Thank y'all. God bless.